Amid the worst civil unrest in the U.S. in half a century, there have been notably few Americans willing to speak up on behalf of the man who lit the fuse, Derek Chauvin, the now former police officer charged with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
The video of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes seems too clear-cut and painful to try to make excuses.
Step forward. Bob Kroll, leader of the Minneapolis Police Union. Kroll wrote to his members this week describing Floyd as a violent criminal because he did prison time, in an apparent attempt to imply Chauvin's treatment of an unarmed man being arrested on suspicion of a nonviolent minor crime was legitimate. The union chief also described those protesting over Floyd's death as terrorists, and the dismissal of Chauvin and 3 other officers facing charges as depriving them of their rights.
A former Minneapolis police chief, Jane Harteau, who battled Kroll in attempting to reform a department with a long history of racial abuse, quickly hit back, saying he was unfit to be a police officer and calling on him to resign from the force.
A disgrace to the badge. This is the battle that myself and others have been fighting against. Bob Kroll, turn in your badge. She wrote on Twitter.
That will not have bothered Kroll. By Harteau's own admission, the union chief is in many ways more powerful than the police chief in Minneapolis, as is the case in many other cities across the U.S.
The Police Federation has historically had more influence over police culture than any police chief ever could, said Harteau. I was fought at every turn, from bringing body cameras to the police department to having implicit bias training to professional development processes and having some more consistency in promotions.
That power of the union, or federation, has often stood in the way of reform, perpetuating old-school racialized policing tactics and shielding officers from accountability.
Harteau attempted comprehensive reforms as police chief for 5 years until 2017 after inviting the U.S. Justice Department to examine the conduct of the Minneapolis police. The result was a strategy, MPD 2.0, a new police model, that put a strong emphasis on community engagement, transparency and public accountability. Harteau said it was consistently resisted and subverted by the union.
She said that when she also attempted to address issues around burnout and mental health of police officers, and to institute an early warning system to flag up those prone to abuse, the union characterized the measures as no more than a way to discipline officers and block them.
Former Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Ryback said the 800-strong police union stood in the way of attempts by successive administrations to change policing culture toward African Americans and other minorities.
I would say the last 5 mayors are very different people, but every one has been deeply committed to reforming the police department. Every one of them. Collectively we have failed to move enough of the levers of change, he said.
Mayor Jacob Frey was elected on a promise to reform the police department, with a strong emphasis on community policing. But he has said the union has resisted all such change. In addition, Frey said he is hamstrung by the architecture of the system, of the union contract and arbitration, which makes it difficult to discipline and dismiss officers for abuses.
The single largest obstacle, said Ryback, is Kroll and his leadership of the Federation that is resistant to any change away from a style of policing that minority communities in Minneapolis describe as acting like an occupying force.
Kroll makes no secret of his taste for old-style police tactics and courts controversy. Last year he appeared at a campaign rally with Donald Trump and praised him as a wonderful president.
The Obama administration and the handcuffing and oppression of police was despicable, he told the rally. The first thing President Trump did when he took office was turn that around, and decided to start letting the cops do their job, put the handcuffs on the criminals instead of us.
Kroll was wearing a Cops for Trump t-shirt his union started selling after Frey barred officers from wearing uniforms at political events. Kroll has been openly hostile to Black Lives Matter, calling it a terrorist organization. In 2016, he commended 4 Minneapolis police officers who walked out of a professional basketball game because players were wearing Black Lives Matter warm-up jerseys. Before he was Federation chief, Kroll had a long record of disciplinary actions against him. He was suspended in 2008 with a fellow officer, while out of uniform and without identifying themselves as police, for beating a man in the street and then having him arrested on false charges.
Kroll has also been suspended for using a homophobic slur to describe a gay aide to the then mayor, Ryback.
This week, Kroll was critical of the current Minneapolis police chief, Madaria Arradondo, who is African American, for immediately firing Chauvin and 3 other officers since charged in Floyd's death.
The pair have a long history. In 2007, Arradondo named Kroll in a lawsuit against the police department accusing it of racial discrimination. Arradondo and 4 other black officers alleged that Kroll made racist statements in front of senior officers and wears a motorcycle jacket with a white power badge sewn onto it.
The lawsuit also alleged that Kroll said then Congressman Keith Ellison, who is black and a Muslim, is a terrorist. At the time Ellison, who is now Minnesota's Attorney General in charge of the Floyd investigation, was pushing for reform of the police department.
The officers alleged that the force has a history of tolerating racist and discriminatory remarks by its white police officers and engaged in discriminatory conduct against its African American police officers.
The action was settled for $800,000 and a promise of change.
Ryback said he does not believe Kroll's views are representative of most officers on the Minneapolis force. The majority of officers I know don't support this racially charged head of their union. But unless they stand up and speak out against him, we cannot make progress. That's why I took Kroll on very publicly and very strong, because we need to help give some guts to these very good officers on the force who are allowing a minority of officers to not only ruin their culture but literally endanger their lives, he said.
The former mayor said officers believe Kroll will stand up for them no matter what when they see themselves as constantly under attack from the public and politicians. Harto said the siege mentality within the force is not helped by a public swift to criticize officers when they are wrong but which rarely stands up for them when they are right.
If the public can never be vocal in support, and the only thing you see is we can be vocal in our opposition or in terminations or discipline, then officers are going to look to the union for protection whether it's legitimate or not, she said. I used to say you could kill somebody and the union would protect you. Well, that's exactly what's happened.
Harto has personal experience of prejudice within the Minneapolis Police Department. She was the first lesbian appointed as a police chief in the U.S. As a junior officer 25 years ago, colleagues did not hide their antipathy. In the mid-90s, I actually walked off the job because of being in a hostile work environment, she said.
Harto said she had another female officer as her patrol partner and male police officers would fail to back them up when called and cut their radio transmissions. She sued the department and won. Before Ryback became mayor, he had been a journalist on the city's newspaper, the Star Tribune. I started off as a reporter covering police officers bashing into gay bathhouses and humiliating residents, he said. As mayor, he was determined to do something about the culture of homophobia. Ryback appointed Harto as police chief. That alone sent a message. He said she changed the culture of the city's police department to one of the most gay-friendly in the country. The appointment of an African American chief to succeed Harto in 2017 was a sign of progress on race. But in recent years the push to change the culture has been complicated by the increased militarization of the police across the country. Ryback said that after 9/11 there was an open federal checkbook, as Homeland Security turned police forces into security agencies, and to buy powerful weapons and surplus military equipment from the U.S. Army after it pulled out of Iraq. Harto said that the circumstances of Floyd's death led her to question what she had been able to achieve as police chief. I would say my administration probably with 100% certainty made more proactive progressive changes than any other administration, yet this incident still occurred, which makes me really question everything I thought I knew, she said.